And welcome to the Two Solitudes podcast. We're not on strike yet, Kevin, but damn it, if I don't get better working conditions, if I don't get more Diet Pepsi in front of my workstation, I am done.
If I don't get spring to come really quickly, I'm out. I'm striking.
All right. Solidarity with the union. So we're going to talk about the CBA a lot today. Kyle Mccarthy from Fox Soccer is our guest. Good guest there. Kevin booked him last night, so thanks for that, Kevin. We had a nice little chat there about Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, some overall stuff as if the season were going to happen, but we also featured in a little bit of talk on the CBA.
He's a former lawyer, Duane, so his impressions on the whole situation is very, very intriguing.
Yeah, so we had that conversation, and that's in the book, in the can. We'll have that up after this. We're going to talk in the middle segment. Orlando has filled the bowl. If they get a chance to fill it, we don't know, but they have 60,000 seats sold for that. So we're just going to have a little chat about the difference between NYCFC and Orlando City from our perspectives, from outside, in the middle, what we think about those two expansion teams as they head into this year, whether we think any of them are going to do well, what we think of this stupid Hearts of Oak stuff and supporters group politics and all that sort of jazz like that. And then we're going to end it with Kevin. What are we going to end it with?
Our season preview in some sort?
Predictions, anyway, yeah. So we're going to put it on the line, and you can clip it, and you can save it, and you can push it down our throats later this year, which you'll do if we're wrong. If we're right, you'll just forget that you saved it, because that's how these things work. But at any rate, in the meantime, Kevin, let's take a quick break. Come back with Kyle.
Come gather round, children, it's high time ye learned about a hero named Homer and a devil named Burns. We'll march till we drop, the girls and the fellas. We'll fight till the death or else fold like umbrellas. So we'll march day and night by the big cooling tower. They have the plant, but we have the power. So we'll march day and night by the big cooling tower. They have the plant, but we have the power.
And welcome back to the Two Solitudes podcast. Kyle Mccarthy from Fox Soccer. Thanks for joining us, Kyle. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thanks. I'm wondering if we're going to start the MLS season on time, though.
Yeah, that's a good question, and we thought we'd start the interview there. Today it was just announced that Orlando has in fact filled the bowl. They have sold out 60,000 tickets for their first game with NYCFC. Kyle, do you think that factor, the fact that they have that huge game, that huge launch for those two clubs, is the one thing that the MLS fans should hold on to hope for, that maybe that will mean that they will be the impetus to getting a deal done?
There's all sorts of impetus to getting a deal done. And it's tough to really pinpoint one factor or another as sort of the driving force in these collective bargaining negotiations. But when you look at it and you see, well, Orlando City's got 60,000 people coming to the Citrus Bowl, that could be a seminal moment for that club. So obviously MLS is going to want to play in that game, and the MLS Players Union are going to want their players to play in that game. So there's certainly some encouragement for everyone to get something done.
I guess the follow-up to that question is really kind of general, and we all, if you're listening to a podcast like this, you know the general issues, so there's no sense going into those. But from what you're hearing, Kyle, what is your hope that something will get done this week?
It's really a coin flip. I talked to a bunch of people last week. I was out in Bradenton and in Tucson to do MLS preseason stuff, and that was the topic. And I talked to a bunch of people, and nobody really knew. Some said, some were positive, some were negative. No one really had a firm grip on the situation, and I don't think they're supposed to, because when you're negotiating, particularly a deal of this magnitude and importance, it comes down to the last minute, and it really hinges on what happens in the room in D.C. this week. And you've got Monday, you've got Tuesday, and you've got Wednesday to really get the framework of the deal in place. And we're just going to kind of have to wait and see, because it's going to depend on how those people get into the room and what they figure out when they really sit down and think about what they want to do over the next couple of days.
How long after the CCL game on Tuesdays and Wednesday do you think the hammer is going to come down, you think?
Well, the strike window, so to speak, it really starts when DC United comes off the field on Wednesday. It's just not practical to go on strike before the CCL stuff finishes out. But that being said, you also have players traveling to away games on that Thursday. And you're not getting players on planes without some sort of firm framework in place for a collective bargaining agreement. So if you're keeping an eye on it, you want to look either late Wednesday night or early Thursday morning, because those are the key times before the players really get ready and geared up for the weekend.
Going back to those CONCACAF Champions League game, Montreal had a great result that could have been a little better, but still we'll take the 2-2 draw in Mexico, playing in the Olympic Stadium tomorrow night. How do you quantify the chances of Montreal to move to the semifinals?
Well, they've done a lot of the hard work, haven't they? And they went down to Mexico and they got the 2-2 draw. Yes, it could have been better. When you start off with a 2-goal lead, you really want to see out the game. But they've got a foothold. They've got a chance. They've got those 2 away goals. But there's still an awful lot of work to do at the Big O. Pachuca's a good side, and they're gonna pose a significant threat.
And how do you expect this season to be for Montreal? You just did a great season preview on Inside MLS that came out yesterday about the Montreal Impact. How do you see Montreal going into the Major League Soccer season, if there is one?
I do think there'll be a season at some point, but I'm interested to see how the Impact comes together with the sort of experience that Klopas has brought in during the off season. With the pieces now in place, I think Simon is a big signing for them to really give them a firm defensive fulcrum after a lot of changes last year. But there are questions throughout the team. You look at it, you wonder, are there going to be enough goals? Are they going to keep the ball well enough? Are the fullbacks going to be strong enough to keep a strong back four? Is Evan Bush up to it in goal? I mean, there are a lot of things that Klopas and the Impact have to sort out over the next 3 or 4 months to really figure out whether they're going to be a playoff contender or not.
Real quickly, Kyle, I'm wondering if, from what you've heard, or if you've heard, whether there's any contingency plan if Montreal or DC, I suppose, were to win that CCL tie, would they have some kind of agreement in place to finish out that competition, even if they were on strike?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know if they've talked about that, but it's certainly interesting. And if it gets to that point, there would have to be some harsh truths exchanged between the sides, because pulling out of the CCL would have significant repercussions for both the club involved and for the league. So that would probably be a deal point between the two sides to figure something out.
All right, fair enough. I guess we'll cross that bridge when it comes. I'll go back to the more pleasant conversation now. The Montreal-based talker here asked you about the Impact, so I guess I have to follow suit from here in Toronto. I'm not going to ask you if TFC is going to make the playoffs, because frankly I think that's a ridiculous concept with the amount of talent and money they've spent. They should damn well be in the top 6 of the East. Do you think TFC has added enough to be a true contending team this year?
The pieces are in place. There is a good side in there, and the Reds are in a spot now where they don't have any excuses. I mean, like you said, they've got to be in the playoffs with the talent they've got. But we said that last year and the year before. I think the difference now is that the type of spending has given the Reds a more cohesive team. I think Josie Altidore will combine with Michael Bradley to really provide the impetus for the side. I think Giovinco will be a great addition, but you still have to see how everything comes together. And I think it might take a year just to sort everything out and see if Greg Vanney's got what it takes to lead a team to the top of MLS, see where there's still room for further additions. But I think it's been an encouraging winter for Toronto FC. Now it's just a matter of making sure that turns into an encouraging spring and summer too.
And we all know how that often turns out here in Toronto. turning our attention to our other Canadian MLS team in Vancouver, they've stayed pat for the most part. Of a few additions here and there. I mean, Carl Robinson, adding him on long term, adding some stability there might have been the most significant thing they did this offseason. So, just what are your impressions of the Whitecaps, and do you think with the addition of the two teams in the West that they still have enough to make a playoff spot out there this year?
It's more difficult for them, certainly, with the arrival of Sporting Kansas City. That's going to make things more complicated. I think Portland's going to be better as well. But the Whitecaps have strengthened. They've got Octavio Rivero in the fold now, a real number 9, which really addressed their primary deficiency from a year ago. And they've got a good team spirit. I had a chance to go out there last year and watch them train and be around them a little bit. It's a group that has the right dynamic. So the credit to Robinson for that. It's just a matter of whether he can get all those young players firing at a consistently high level over the course of the season to compete in a very difficult Western Conference.
Cal, with the two new teams coming in the league, spending a lot of money and a lot of hype behind those two teams, do you think there's a chance that one of those two teams is going to have a good season, playoff, even maybe top 3 in the East type of season?
Well, I think if you're looking at the two expansion teams, you can be encouraged with some of the stuff they've done. But it's difficult to put everything together on short notice. Personally, I think Orlando City has the stronger squad right now. They've done a good job of blending their USL pro team with some of the additions from overseas. They've got a nice mix of youth and experience, and they're in a spot where I think they can compete for a playoff berth. And New York City FC has done pretty well too. They've got some pieces, but they also have some questions. So at this stage, I think it's too much to ask for top 3. But for both expansion teams, with the expanded playoff field, they can reasonably set their sights on a postseason berth.
Kyle, Kevin and I are going to end this show today with our predictions for how various things end out in the season, assuming it starts sometime soon. But the last question I have for you in that vein is we've sort of talked about the top teams in Canada and some overall stuff, but if you could just sort of give me one dark horse team or dark horse performance that you think we might see that no one's really talking about in MLS this year.
Oh, that's a really good question. When I look at teams that people don't talk about, I look at FC Dallas. I think that's going to be a really intriguing story because they put together a pretty good season in Oscar Pareja's first year. And now they've got that foundation in place. The question is, can they take that next step? Are they going to be good enough to really compete at the top of the West, or are they going to slide back down? Either way, I think that team's going to be worth monitoring over the course of this season.
All right, Kyle Mccarthy from Fox Soccer, we do appreciate your time today, and hopefully we all get to talk about soccer this time next week as well. And we're back. Thanks again to Kyle for joining us. I thought, Kevin, that one of the most telling parts of that interview was the long pause that happened when I asked him about what would happen if Montreal or DC got through.
It's like nobody thought about that.
No one has considered the possibility that an MLS team could advance. It's telling on a couple different levels. However, it does beg an interesting question. You would wonder, like, how much of a strike is it if the players agreed to play those games, which they might, though. A lot of people wouldn't understand that, but it might be something that they did. We're on strike. But we're going
to strike. But, you know, the little tournament that we're getting every year that we're actually doing well this year, we kind of want to play that game.
Although you think about it from a player perspective, and we talked a bit about strategies in the last show, the special show on Friday, they might kind of want one of those two teams to go through because that just adds a little bit more pressure point to them. I asked Kyle whether the 60,000 seats would be a pressure point that might be the impetus to a deal. I was talking to a few people, quote unquote. I was on Reddit this morning arguing with people, as I'm apt to do sometimes. And
you don't have enough hate in your life, so you go to Reddit.
Yeah, I have a lot of minus. My quote karma is really low because I disagree with people a lot, and they don't know who I am in there, and I'm not going to tell you what my handle is. So, so I have a pretty low quote karma on that, whatever that means. But at any rate, yeah. So there's a lot of feeling that some people believe that 60,000 seat thing is something that's relevant. Other people don't. I don't know. Do you think that that's going to be a pressure point for the players or for the owners, I should say, Kevin?
It could be. Can you imagine how Joey Saputo is going to feel if Montreal qualifies for the semifinal, but there's a strike? The amount of pressure he's going to put on the league, or he was trying to put on the league. The whole dynamic could change. The whole who's got the big end of the stick, the big old cliche in a strike or a lockout situation. Well, yeah, it could be. It won't change everything, but it just adds a little talking point. It just adds a little, for us in Montreal, it would have a lot of interest in those negotiations.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I don't think it would put pressure on both sides in a lot of ways, because ultimately what happens, in at least my perspective, when player strikes happen, or player work stoppages, I should use the proper terminology. We're not sure, but this one seems like it's going to be a strike, but in the past we've seen a lot of lockouts.
You never know. A lockout could be decreed right after the game on Wednesday. You never know.
Yeah, well, I'd be surprised if the owners made the move, but at any rate, often the fan pressure tends to shift towards the athletes, or the fans tend to support the owners for some reason. Well, it's not for some reason. It's because they want their soccer and they view the players as being unreasonable. They're getting paid to play a game, and why can't they just get at it? I don't know whether it'll be the same in this particular case, because I think most MLS fans understand that in many cases they're making as much or more money than the players that are on strike. So it's a little less off-putting that way, but it certainly would add an element of pressure. In terms of timing, we touched base with Kyle on this as well, and I'll just add my 2 cents to the timing of when a work stoppage might happen. As those of you that have listened to this for the last few days probably realize, I have been in a union before. I've been in a strike position before. We went down to the last hour. I ended up not we were technically on strike for 3 hours, but I didn't walk a picket line or anything like that. For the record, it was when I was a corrections officer for young offenders back in the late 90s. It's before I became a journalist. At any rate, so I've seen how this works, and I know that usually what happens, and I don't want to universalize this, but from what I know of labor, and I have enough connections in enough different places to say this with some degree of certainty, generally what will happen is one of the first things that will be negotiated at the table is an agreement put in place that each side will inform the other within X period of time of an intent to walk out, or an intent to lock out or walk out.
It's 24 hours for MLS. I think there was an announcement in the last couple of days that both sides have agreed to a 24-hour grace period, or a warning, you could say.
Yeah, and that, like I said, that's common across labor sector. It's generally when you sit down to negotiate, the terms of negotiation are generally set out in the first hour of your meetings, and that's one of the terms, is that each side agrees. And it's courtesy. They may be combatants, but at the same time, they understand that there's certain pragmatic elements that need to be put in place. If the owners are going to lock you out, you need to inform your landlord, or you need to let your spouse know, or you need to make different arrangements. If you're going to be going on strike, the owners need to get security in there. They need to, do certain things to prepare them. In this particular case, they need to cancel games, right? Mm-hmm. So I think when you factor all that in, what Kyle said that Wednesday after the CCL game is probably bang on. I suspect that if there's not a deal in place Wednesday at that time, they won't right away. They will negotiate overnight. If those talks break down at any time between then and 10 p.m. Thursday, 10 p.m. Thursday being significant in the sense that is 24 hours before the scheduled kickoff time of the first game of the MLS season. So I believe that the drop-dead minute is 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, although you would likely see movement towards a work stoppage sometime earlier in the day on Thursday, because a decision would need to be made by Chicago whether they were going to fly out. So that's probably what's going to happen.
So if Chicago boards the plane or not is going to be probably the biggest indication if the season starts on time or not.
Yeah, they can. They're not going to, the players aren't going to put them, if they're going to strike, the players aren't probably going to want to put themselves in position where they're stranded in LA. They don't make enough money that they can afford to fly back, unless the unions arrange to have their own chartered plane out there to fly them back to wherever they're going. So that's a possibility. Look, there is another alternative that not a lot of people are talking about, and you can play without a CBA. The CBA that is previous, so in this case the one that expired, remains in place from a legal standpoint until such time as a new one is put in place when you're in a dispute like this. So if there is progress going on in the talks, then there is the chance that they will play this weekend without a CBA, technically under last year's CBA agreement. So, if that happens, then that's a good sign. It means that progress has been made. If it hasn't happened, then, they're going to walk. I think, Kevin, and we'll maybe segue after this because we're going to have plenty of time to talk about this, I think. And we will. I haven't talked to you about this yet, Kevin, but I think that if there is some kind of movement towards a lockout, we'll probably have a show about it. But
absolutely. For sure.
Yeah,
we have shows for lesser reason than that, so of course we're going to do special shows.
So we will have a talk about that, or we'll also have a talk if the CBA, is signed, because we'll have to talk about that as well. So we'll have more opportunity to speak about this. My informed speculation, both on my past labor experience and from talking to people close to here, close to the situation, interviews that I've done, talking to a few people off record, is that, I think that this is going to come to a head. And it's going to come down to whether the owners are creative enough to satisfy themselves and the players with some form of freer movement. And I'm using my terminology purposely here because I don't think it's very likely we're going to see free agency in the same way that we see it in the NBA or the NHL or Major League Baseball or the NFL. But I do think that there will need to be some way that players have control over where they go after X amount of years service. And it depends on how creative the owners are going to come up with that. The last time they came up with the re-entry draft is kind of a farce in a lot of ways, and that's been proven, and that's why the players aren't satisfied with it. So they're going to need to improve on that. We're going to need to have a situation where you don't have like two guys picked in the first round of the re-entry draft, or you have players – well, ultimately you need the players – still a draft, like they still don't have control over where they're going. That's going to need to change because I do truly believe, and I'm not unique in saying this, that the players aren't going to bend on that until they get some kind of movement rights after X amount of years, probably 5, maybe 7. Without that happening, they're going to push it. And I would be right now, Kyle said that it was a coin flip for this weekend. I think it's a coin flip for the weekend, but I think that there is probably less than 50% chance, in my mind anyway, that the game Friday is going to happen. I think that the players need to prove that they're willing to walk out for the owners to blink, and that means that they're probably going to walk out on Thursday morning sometime, and that will force the league to cancel Friday's game. I suspect that they will not blanket cancel the whole first weekend off the top. They will just continue to negotiate if there's any movement whatsoever there, and as the days progress, as they get in those 24-hour windows, they will start canceling games, leaving the Orlando, New York game until the very end.
Another quickly, just to end the conversation, Duane, about the labor talks. The one thing that could be said, it's a precedent too for a soccer league in 2 different countries with a work stoppage or a work disagreement. So that part of the deal is going to be interesting because if I was one of the 2 sides, I don't want to go into courts in Quebec or BC with all the labor laws that are really complicated compared to the U.S. ones. So that could be too some type of pressure on both sides to get a resolution to that disagreement.
Yeah. I mean, real quickly for the American listeners that we do have, there's a lot of questions people ask about replacement players. That's not going to happen. And one of the main reasons it's not going to happen is because in both British Columbia and Quebec, which their politics in BC and Quebec are so far left from what you're used to in the United States that you would blow your mind out. Like they're not even comparable to what you'd find in the U.S. Like they're way left, right? Mm-hmm. Pro labor in a way that you'd never see down there. But the bottom line is that you cannot legally use replacement players. The Montreal Impact and the Vancouver Whitecaps would need to play their home games outside of BC and Quebec if they were to even possibly operate in a replacement player situation. And even in those cases, there would be ample opportunities to legally challenge that. But yeah, there's a lot of complications to that. All right, Kevin. I wanted to move into more positive. Let's put that aside. We all understand what's going on there. We all understand that there's a possibility the league won't start this week, but it might start this week too. So that's work under the assumption for the rest of the podcast that we're going to see soccer sooner rather than later. I wanted to start with have a conversation about Orlando and New York City FC and get your general perspective and have a little chat about how we see those 2 teams launching. And I guess I'll throw to you, Kevin, and just ask you in a general way. If I had this is the question I'm going to ask you, and then I'll answer it myself. Which of those two teams do you think is going to be better this year, and which of those two teams do you think is going to be better long term?
This year, I believe Orlando is going to be better for a couple different reasons. Fan support, just the amount of coverage, the amount of because of the fact that they've been a team for so long, it does have an advantage compared to a brand new expansion team that's new at all levels, from the trainers to the top head of the office. When you're looking at a team like Orlando, it's Agent Eastman. They go for many years down there. They're having some players from USL that have been playing together, but more the feel of the team, the locker room feel, the whole actual head office is used to the team. May not used to the league, but they're used to being a team together. And I believe the whole idea of the support that's going to be massive, especially with the filled the bowl, now it's filled, that's going to bring some type of result for Orlando. Long term, I do believe New York City might have a better roster long term because of the fact they have a little bit more experience in MLS. But the stars for now, like the Villa and the Lampard, is going to come eventually. We're not going to get started on Lampard, I know, but just eventually Lampard's going to have an effect. I believe those type of players, because they come from such a different type of environment, different type of countries and playing style, it'll take a couple of months. So I expect New York City to be better next year. But this year, Orlando seems to be the best case for me right now.
Yeah, and that's a fair assessment. I mean, I'm not going to sway too much further from that. I do think that there is a lot of example of Orlando doing well at the lower levels, although, and I think a lot of people in Orlando hang their hat on that. No, I think that I could ask folks in both Vancouver and Montreal how much that really converts, because
we had that conversation before, Duane. It's the fact that when you have a lot of money and resources at the lower level, it does give you a better advantage on the pitch to get results, just because you can scout better, recruit better, and have a whole environment that's better suited for good result on the pitch. It's not the case when you don't have those funds. And Orlando, like Montreal and Vancouver, did have those type of environment in the lower levels.
Yeah, that said, success does breed success sometimes, and both Montreal and Vancouver did launch better than Toronto did, better than Philadelphia did, which are two concrete examples of teams that launched from nothing that have truly struggled. The only reason people don't realize how badly Philly's been is because Toronto's in the league. I maintain that.
Toronto's the American Philly.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Philly.
Philly has been absolutely horrendous, really, when you look at their line. They did make the playoffs the one year, sort of, barely. And they've been crap every year since, considering the amount. And they have a lot of it. There's a lot of analogies between TFC and the Philly Union. We'll just leave it at that. I digress. Someone that said the other day, they tweeted at me that they were going to create a drinking game for every time I said I digress. So there you go. Have a shot.
He's drunk already.
Yeah. To answer the question that I posed myself there, I do think Orlando will be slightly better this year, although because I think Kaká is from what I've seen, although there's a great vine out there. Well, I think he was fouled, but there's a great vine of him getting the ball stripped the other day. But at any rate, I do think they'll be slightly better this year. The team's going to be good, and I know a lot of people like to think that otherwise, and they look at the money and they look at the big name players in there and they think, well, surely they're going to be good, but to me, you look at them as an expansion side, especially at the back. And I've watched three NYCFC games this year. I've seen Orlando play once. They're going to struggle at the back. They're going to get burned for goals. And if you're allowing goals in this league, you're going to lose games. So I actually have not even penciled. I put with like a pen that has an eraser in the end. Those old erasable pens you used to have in the 80s and 90s. I did that, so it's almost penned in, but I might be able to get rid of it. That they're going to both be out of the playoffs, which will give TFC fans some hopes and Montreal fans some hopes.
I think it's going to be the case as well. I think, like you say, they're going to lead goals because all of their best addition are not in the back line for both teams, and I think that's going to be the case. Some can say that Orlando has an advantage in that or whatever because you've used to the whole situation, but I don't think it's going to be good. I haven't had a good experience with Ricketts here, to be fair, and I think it's going to be one of the downfalls for Orlando, and who knows, might be the case for NYCFC as well. Just the fact that their backline and goalkeeper combination are all brand new, that's going to turn out to be leaking goals, and at the end of the day, even if you score 2 but you got 3 past you lose games. So that's it.
And long term, I think there's money, and then there's money, and NYC has money. And they also have Jason Kreis, and they have a front office that's been there and done that before. So I think long-term NYCFC. And, you also have the New York factor where the league office has a history. And we're not going to say of cheating and manipulating so that the teams from the big cities do well, but well, you watch this league too, so there's that advantage as well.
A certain facilitating of deals, you could say.
Yeah, they get the benefit of the doubt. All right. I wanted to touch base. There's an hilarious story. This is a week or so old, but there was this supporters group stuff that started. Hearts of Oak is the name of the supporters group, and Hearts of Oaks, for those that don't know, is a name of a famous African football club team from Ghana, which is odd that they would name the NYCFC supporters group after a football club from Ghana that won like the African Club Championship in the 80s a bunch of times. But at any rate, it's the oldest club. I think it's actually the oldest club football team in Africa. If you look it up, if you ever read the ball is round, David Goldblatt, the must read overall history of the sport of football. It should be read by anyone, even if you're just a history buff, like even if you're not a soccer fan. I know I'm not talking to a lot of those right now, but if you're not, you should read it. Anyway, I digress. Have another drink. It's the 80.
I should have like a bell on this.
Yeah, it's the ADD, man. It's the ADD. Anyway, so Hearts of Oak. If you didn't know this story by now, I don't know where you've been, but they basically require like 6 pints of blood, an FBI clearance, your grandfather's ashes, and even if he's not alive, you still need to give him his ashes, and a whole bunch of other things to join their supporters club.
To sacrifice your first.
Yeah, there's a lot of requirements, and I tweeted out there's a list of these requirements, and apparently they've changed a little bit. I was told because someone tweeted back at me that he was quote unquote sick of the blank and wanted to clarify the mode. So now you only need like one reference instead of three, and
it was to be one written reference, 3 references total. Needed like a deposit. Needed to not be a part of any other supporters group whatsoever. Not just part of, no other event. You need to dedicate a certain amount of times per week. It was truly almost a deal with a devil.
Not a word of a lie. It was easier for me to get into journalism school. Now I didn't go to a great journalism school, but alas, I didn't go to Columbia or something. So, but that aside, it was easier for me to get into college. But at any rate, look, Kevin and I were talking off air, and we'll leave it at this. Every supporters group is entitled to run their supporters group how they see fit. However, Kevin and I both agree, and this is I stole this originally from the Timbers Army back in the day before going to MLS. They had on their page a simple phrase that was, if you think you're Timbers Army, you are. And we've kind of adopted that in Toronto a little bit here. If you think you're U sector, the group that I'm in, you are. If you think you're anyone, you are. And to me, that's how a supporters group in MLS should run. It's like-minded individuals that are there for a common cause, not necessarily needing to give blood and sacrifice their cat or something to join. That's wrong. Do not sacrifice Mittens. He didn't deserve anything. He's just sitting there looking at you cutely. He just wants a treat. Do not sacrifice the cat to join Hearts of Oak. That's my message to you right now, folks.
If that was you and me, I would not sacrifice not even $20 to be part of Hearts of Oak. But that's another discussion.
Yes, I love my cats, so don't worry, folks. No cats were abused in the making of this podcast. Well, we've gone too far in that. Couple other quick.
We digress.
Yeah, we digress. Another drink.
We'll get them drunk by the end of the show.
Yes, exactly. Another couple quick little small notes. Preseason ended. Does anyone care who won the MLS preseason? Kevin, do you want to take a guess what team had the most wins in MLS preseason?
I don't know.
The San Jose Earthquakes are the champions of MLS preseason with 7 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws. MLS does it backwards here, so it's 7-1-2 was their record. That is an absurd amount of preseason games to play, however.
They played 10 games.
Yeah, that's a lot of games. All right, let's see. Other teams that had a great preseason. Houston had 5 wins in the preseason. The New York Red Bulls had 5. New York Red Bulls had a really great preseason. They went 5-1-1, including 3-0 against MLS opposition. The Whitecaps and the Canadian teams, the Whitecaps were 4-1-2. That is win, loss, draw, or win, draw, loss. Pardon me. No, win, loss, draw. I can never tell which way they do them when they do this because they mix it up all the time. Anyway, TFC was 4-3-1. The Impact, where are you, Montreal? The Impact were 3-1-1. That includes the CCL play against MLS opposition. The Impact were perfect against MLS opposition this offseason, this preseason, they were absolutely perfect. Of course, they didn't win any games either. They're 0-0. Played.
I was going to say, yeah, they're unbeaten, but they're winless as well.
All right. As I said a couple podcasts ago, I did a whole study on whether there was any correlation whatsoever between preseason results and records and regular season records. Zero. None. Literally, looks like a art. Like this, the scatter graph it looks like art. It's like a big circle with no correlation whatsoever. So just put those out of your minds. But those are the records there. The under-17s. We're going to touch on the under-17s. You know what? There's no television. You can't watch the games. It's hard to really see. I saw the.
There's not even streams. There's nothing.
There's highlights. There's a highlight package that comes out. So I did watch Canada's highlights. They beat Haiti 3-1 in their first game. So they did what they needed to do. The backline did not look particularly good for either side in that game, to be honest. There were some nice finishes by the Canadian team, so I'll give them that. And there's this kid, his name was Duane, and it was spelled really weirdly. It was Duwaye or something. Anyway, yeah, he had a great dance after he scored, so you want to check that out on the CONCACAF TV. So lots of good stuff to talk about there. It gets really tough for the Canadian under-17s from here. They have been drawn into like the group of death of deaths, like the death group of death. I don't even know how to say that. It's like the worst group I've ever seen. They have Panama, Costa Rica, and Mexico in their group with them. So it's a tough slug. At any rate, they're up next against Costa Rica. They're going to need to. The assumption is Mexico, who has actually won the entire thing of the U17 World Cup before, not CONCACAF. They've won the U17 World Cup recently. So you got to figure Mexico's the favorite in that group. So they're going to need to at least get a split in the games with Panama and Costa Rica to have a chance to go on and to get a knockout game, to get a chance to go to the World Cup. So we hope and we cheer for them, but we're not holding out a lot of hope, especially after what we saw for the U20s. I'd rather downplay these kids' chances than overplay them after the U20s, right, Kevin?
On top of it, they're playing in Honduras, so yeah, not going to be easy.
Yeah, they're playing in a stadium that may be famous or infamous for some of us, but at any rate. All right.
That damn San Pedro Sula.
I hate to go there one day. I hate to go there one day. That didn't make any sense. Edit that out. All right. We'll take a quick break. Come back. Kevin and I will give you your predictions.
You're listening to the Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie. You can reach the guys on Twitter at 24th Minute and at Kev Laramie. Email twosolitudespodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to the show on Stitcher, iTunes, Feedburner, Podbay, Player. Yeah, listen to the show. Now listen to us flow. Yeah, Northern hospitality. That's how we do. Now back to the show.
And welcome back. Kevin and I off air, you the listeners can let us know. We were thinking of doing a AFL, an Australian Football League podcast, because we don't do enough podcasting. So if you would like us to do an AFL podcast, just let us know. It's going to be two Canadian guys that don't know what the hell they're talking about this AFL is what the title is going to be. And that's going to be the podcast. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, the first guy will be like, look at this amount of space that's wasted here. Look at the size of that field.
And we're going to make it up. We're going to mix terms up. And we're going to always analogize it back to hockey.
Look at the field goal.
I know we probably have a couple Aussie listeners out there, so you let us know. Actually, I have an AFL. I love the AFL. We were talking about this too. St. Kilda is my team, and the reason I picked St. Kilda, and everyone listening outside of the of Toronto will appreciate the reason why I picked St. Kilda, because St. Kilda has a massive following. They're an old club, and they are quite literally the worst team statistically in AFL history. They have finished last overall more than any other team in the AFL. They haven't won a title since the 60s. They've only won one title ever all time, so they are literally horrible. So that's why I adopted them as my team, because they sort of fit my Toronto aesthetic.
I was gonna say it. You just used to following that type of team, Dwayne. You're from Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. You can't accuse me of glory hunting. Cannot. I'm not going to pick Geelong or something. Come on, people.
You're from Toronto, the Cleveland of the North.
Yeah, there you go. All right. I think that's the most AFL ever spoken about on a MLS podcast, I think.
What is it, in North America?
Yeah, it's a new world record we just broke. We're just avoiding our predictions is what's happening here, but we might as well get at it. So we're going to predict you. We're going to give you our predictions for how we think each of the 3 Canadian MLS teams are going to finish, who's going to win the Voyageurs Cup, who we think the league MVP is going to be, who we think is going to win the Supporters Shield, who's going to be the playoff champion in the East and West, which of course then leads us to think who's going to win the MLS Cup. We're also going to give you our MLS Dark Horse Team Pick of the Year. So the team we think that no one's talking about, like I asked Kyle, that's going to be good. So let's actually start with that one, Kevin. So who do you think your MLS dark horse pick is this year? And we'll go Kevin and then me, Kevin, then me. We'll do it like that.
Houston in the West. I believe they did a great offseason. Matt Jordan took control of that team and the management and took control of that locker room with the players and brings some great addition with the Kubo Torres out of nowhere. A lot of good signings, and I believe Houston's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the West. I don't know if they'll be contenders for the Shield. Who knows? But they're my dark horse pick for sure for 2015.
Yeah, it's in Owen Coyle is an interesting thing there, whether he can adjust. I actually listened to a preview. I catch up on Soccer Morning in the weekends a lot, so I listened to the Soccer Morning's Houston preview just like less than 24 hours ago. So it's kind of fresh in my mind. I think there are issues at the back. There's some questions about who's going to score goals for them, but their biggest problem last year was leaking goals. If they can fix that, you know, it's a team that has a lot of grit, that has a lot of sort of experience on that team, that they could definitely find their way in an MLS playoff spot. And once they get in the playoff spot, even though it's a different coach, you know what happens with the Orange team when they're playing a playoff game, right?
With the temperatures in Houston in the fall, it's very difficult for other teams to have result in Houston. So you never know what can happen in the playoff with Houston.
All right. My dark horse pick, and I'm going to lose my Toronto card for this because people aren't going to like this pick. I think the Columbus Crew are going to be.
They were my second choice. Wait.
Yeah, they're a young team that really is built right. Look, I can't help but, even though I have certain past history with Columbus, I'm kind of past that now because it's a bunch of people that I don't deal with anymore that made me dislike that franchise. I can logically look at them now and see that I like what they're doing from an on-field perspective. I really like what the Crew have done. I think that the Crew could be this year's New England Revolution in the East. They have a real chance to be high up the table, and that is why the Crew are my pick to be the dark horse pick in MLS this year.
Your Trillium Cup rival.
Yeah, they might win the Trillium Cup too. We are the current holders of the Trillium Cup. Damn it! Who says Toronto FC didn't win a trophy last year?
Hey, they won the off-season championship for a second year in a row.
Yeah, and you can buy some T-shirts to support the podcast if you want. We'll get that link out too. But at any rate,
teespring.com/Solitudes podcast.
Yeah, so we got there's a TFC off-season champions T-shirt out there if you want to support us that way. $15 to help us along. Anyway, TFC. We segue into TFC. So we're going to go through the 3 Canadian teams now. Where do you see the Mighty Reds of Toronto, Kevin?
I see them third in the East. A combination of having 2 expansion team, having those type of games are maybe easier for Toronto. Who knows? All that compared to the fact that the East as well is a little weaker than the West. Well, a lot weaker than the West. So that all those factors combined with the fact that Toronto has a lot of new players, consistency with the coaching. Yeah, it's not the one that started last year, but it's the one that finished last year. So there's a consistency there. So I think all those factors in, I think Toronto can probably be top 3 in the East.
And it's interesting. Kevin and I talked. This is the only pick that we know what each other picked because Toronto is always what people talk about because we're the center of the universe here, right?
Speaking of dark humor and sarcasm, we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. At any rate, yeah, I actually have them third as well, and this is not the first time I've made the third place prediction. So I don't think this is breaking news for anyone. The old phrase "even a blind nut or even a blind squirrel gets a nut" sometimes comes to mind. That they're bound to eventually figure it out. But I do think that you've got to take the past away when you're evaluating where TFC is at. You have to look at the East as a whole. I just said in the last segment that I think the 2 expansion teams are probably. You're looking at bottoms, 7, 8, 9, 10 for those teams, somewhere in there. TFC is going to get some wins there. If they can get through that road trip off the start of the year, and who knows, maybe we might even have some of that cut off with a pitch, then I think that this team is built to be fairly successful. They are a little deeper than they have been in the past. I think a kid like Jay Chapman, and I've been watching him carefully in the preseason, looks like he could be a real contributor for them this year as some more depth in the midfield. I think that's a key thing. Orsario's looked good in his new role in my mind, and he does have a new role. He's going to be starting there. I think Javenko is absolutely going to be a brilliant player and a player that's going to be talked about across this league.
Nice goal he did 2 days ago. I saw him. There was a great vine on it too. A shot that the keeper never understood what was happening.
And Josie Altidore is, I think that Javenko can open up that space along with Giroux and really give Altidore the type of space that he can really utilize. If you saw his volley goal in preseason from the other day, another Vine's out for that, then there's a lot of opportunity there. We're going to talk in detail about the team, so I'm going to leave it at that. But that is my prediction that TFC will be third in the East. Don't ask me for anything that happens beyond that, but that is where I see them right now. Let's move on and talk about our friends on the left coast. Kevin, where do you see the Whitecaps finishing this year?
I see them with a consistency, with the fact that they didn't change too much of their roster, a couple of pieces here and there. Still missing a core of the defense, in my opinion, maybe missing a little bit of mobility in the center back position. Those type of players could be useful, but I still believe Vancouver can have a really good season. The home field advantage mixed with Robinson doing a great job as a head coach. And yes, it's going to be difficult in the West, but they have one more playoff spot than last year, and I believe Vancouver is going to take advantage of that spot and finish 6th. So I believe that a second Canadian club in the playoff after Toronto 3rd, Vancouver 6th.
Yeah, and look, people are always going to accuse me of Vancouver bias here, and maybe there is some, I don't know. But I look at Vancouver, and you're right. I think they're going to be a very similar team to they were last year. They have added a little bit up front. If that turns out, if Maddox can get his game going, there's a lot of ifs there that could potentially push them up. Vancouver is the true range team in a lot of ways when you're doing a prediction that they could be 3rd, but they could be 8th. I honestly don't know where to put them. I think the CCL factor and plays a role, a little bit of wear down, losing some home games in the middle of the year. All of those make me think that they're going to finish just outside the playoffs this year at 7th, because I also think that the addition of the 2 teams coming into the West with Portland getting better is another factor that's going to play. I don't think Vancouver's going to be worse than they were last year. I don't think they're going to be better than they were last year, but I think the West is going to be even a little bit better, and that's going to make them just a little bit outside of the playoff spot. But that said, I could easily see them going up a couple spots there, a couple spots there, but ultimately I think they're kind of the same team.
Absolutely. And then now to Montreal. A lot of speculation with the move, if the team's going to gel together or not. I have to be honest with you, Duane. Watching them play last Tuesday in the CONCACAF Champions League down in Mexico, the 2 players that impressed me the most is Baki Soumare and Laurent Simon. Their combination in the middle of the defense could be very solid in Major League Soccer play. For aerial type play, very strong and fit defenders that can hold their space in the midfield. They're not going to get sucked in the vacuum that a nice attacker can do, like a Villa or maybe a Kaká. They're used to that type of playing. So I think the combination of those in defense is going to be the key for the impact. And I predict, you know what? A 3rd Canadian team in a playoff spot with Montreal in 5th position in the East.
Fair enough. Look, they impressed down in Mexico, and I think that although, as we talked about in the last podcast, is not something you should hang your hat on completely. I do think that it gave some indication that if they're willing to be motivated and dedicated and just consistently play their positions and play a strong defensive game, then they could be absolutely in the mix for a playoff spot in the East. And in fact, I also have them in the playoffs. Now, I did put them a spot lower than what you did. I have them pegged for 6th. But I do think that they are going to be in that battle for those last few spots the whole season long, and I do think they're going to be much better than they were last year, and I think that they finally are starting to learn their lesson, as long as Joey doesn't get a head rush in the middle of the year and do something drastic, that there's really a nice little core that they can build upon there now. So I do think that Montreal's going in the right direction, and I do think that they will add a second team in the playoffs for you. This is 3 for you, but it'll be 2 for me.
I predict a historical season in Canadian soccer and Major League Soccer.
Yes, which means the 3rd place is our peak for
ever.
But at any rate, there's even a possibility if you look. If you look at all those playoffs mix at, if there is, I would put it here. Let me do a drastic prediction, and then we'll move on. I think there's a 20% chance that the Montreal Impact and the TFC could meet in a playoff game. Now, wouldn't that be something?
Wow, that could be probably. Yes, there's a big rivalry. According to Major League Soccer, there's not a big rivalry between Montreal and Toronto. It's not even in the choices for best rivalry in the league. But between you and me, it is a rivalry.
It's one of the few legitimate rivalries in Major League Soccer that has historical tie-ins, but we're not going to have that conversation today. I did find it interesting that they have actually officially started to call it the 401 Derby, which I think is the perfect name because it also does ignore the fact that the 20 is there too, which is perfect for the rivalry when you look at it historically. It's the French being angry that the English are ignoring Quebec, right?
Sounds good.
401 Derby it is.
Solitudes.
401 Derby it is. I like the St. Lawrence Derby. I've looked at a lot of different ways in this one, but yeah, 401 just keeps coming up. It's got to be about the highway, and I've driven that 401-20 a lot. So
oh yeah, same here.
So sixth place. So to review, we pretty much were about the same in there. You had Vancouver a little bit higher. I had Vancouver a little bit lower. We had TFC the same, and we basically had the Impact the same position. So we're not really being that interesting in our debate here. But there we go. Let's end the Canadian talk by looking at our favorite cup, the greatest cup of all, the Voyageurs Cup. Who is going to be your 2015 Voyageurs Cup champion?
I have to say that I think there's a chance for a three-peat. I do smell the three-peat. I have a feeling that because the CONCACAF Champions League is already set for this year, Montreal is going to want a second playing field. They're used to having two battlefield at the same time in the last couple of years. So I believe that with the squad depth that they do seem to have heading into the regular season, who knows what's going to happen this summer in Vancouver. The Voyageurs Cup is probably going to have feelings coming back to Montreal for third year in a row.
I think I actually picked the Impact as well. I think TFC is the most talented of the three Canadian teams, but I think the TFC will want to put a greater focus on their MLS play during that time. And I think that the Impact and Joey in particular really takes a lot of pride and relish in that trophy. So they I think will focus on it just enough and just a bit more, which will allow them to win the competition again. I think that we saw Carl Robinson last year in Vancouver. I know the Vancouver fans desperately want to win this, but I'm not sure Carl Robinson shares their wish. So I kind of dismissed, not just for the funny reasons of dismissing Vancouver. They can never win the Voyageurs Cup. And American listeners, we repeat, even in the pre-MLS history, the Vancouver Whitecaps have never won the Voyageurs Cup. I just don't see it because I just don't think they're going to prioritize it. I will say this. I'll make another prediction on the V Cup side of things. I do think this is the year that an NASL team beats an MLS team in V Cup play. I don't think they're going to win the tie, but I think that whoever gets through Ottawa and Edmonton will win a game outright this year, and that's going to be.
The ref.
Yeah, well, yeah, they did win a game. They did win the damn tie last time, but at any rate.
Yeah, I agree with you. But one quick note: I think if there's a work stoppage, that will emphasize the point that TFC is going to focus on MLS. Can you imagine if some of the games have been beginning of the season have been replaying in the middle of the season this summer? Well, that will not leave a lot of time between games, and I think Toronto is just going to put the academy on the field for the V Cup.
Yeah, or the USL too. Yeah, that's the funny thing.
Too, right? Oh, that's another good point, Duane.
Yeah, you might see. I suspect you're going to see a lot of two players out there for the V Cup games for all the teams. I mean, they have to balance it, and that's cup competition everywhere in the world. But that said, as we've seen the last couple of years, and I do think that even just the way Joey Saputo reacted to the tardiness of ticket sales in Montreal, that's probably the case that he's going to.
Breaking news, Duane. Breaking news: 30,000 tickets sold.
30,000? Well, that's pretty good.
What was the prediction 2 weeks ago? 30,000.
30,000 tickets, which is what if TFC, when they played KC at the Dome the second year when they played the Dome game in March, that was about 30,000 that were in there. It was a nice crowd in there. It wasn't a bad day. It wasn't quite like the LA game. So I think you'll have a similar experience. It won't quite be the Santos Laguna game, but it'll still be a lot of fun for you. All right, let's move on to overall MLS stuff, and we'll move to the one player one that I wanted to put there. Who do you think, Kevin, at the end of the day is going to be standing holding the Landon Donovan Memorial MVP trophy? It's not called that, but it might as well be.
Robbie Keane, again. Before he doesn't win it, I think it's his to lose. I think even though Landon Donovan is retiring and the spectrum of Ellie changed a little bit, he still got Zardes there, who's going to have another great season, and I believe Robbie Keane it's his to lose. He's like a notch above everybody else so far in the league. So.
Yeah, it is his to lose, and I didn't pick him because I'm trying to be cuter here, and I'm gonna. Yeah, look, I'm already scrambling to justify this pick because people are going to start laughing as soon as they hear it, and they're going to start screaming.
You picked Bradley last year, no?
No, yeah, you did pick Bradley. I remember that. At any rate, I almost picked Bradley. I have okay, I might as well spit it out. Josie Altidore. Now, bear with me. I think that the MLS hype factory desperately wants to have Josie Altidore hyped and be a big player in this league. I do think that with the service he gets, that I do think TFC is going to have a decent year, and I do think he's going to get good service. So that makes me think he might score close to 20 goals. If Josie Altidore scores 20 goals in MLS and no one else has some kind of crazy season, they're going to give him the MVP because they want to. And the MVP is ultimately about hype, and it's about name recognition, and it's about a lot of things that aren't necessarily about being the best player on the pitch. Robbie Keane has been the best player in Major League Soccer for the last 3 years. He hasn't won the last 3 MVPs, right? So I am picking Josie Altidore, and a bit of that is me being cute and funny because it's TFC and blah, 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 and you know, playing the role of Toronto, big bad Toronto boy here. But a part of it's also logic for the reason that I just said. Robbie Keane would be my betting choice, though. If you had to put money down, I would pick Keane.
You probably got to get good odds, though. If you probably got to get like 1-1 or like 1.5-1 or something.
Although if on the MLS official one, the Extra Time Radio, they picked Kaká. Two of them said that they thought Kaká was going to be the MVP this year, which is an interesting choice considering Orlando might win 4 games.
I have a feeling that he's going to look bright and shiny in the beginning. The first hard tackle he gets, he's going to reconsider his choice, I think. We'll see.
Maybe, yeah. And I mentioned it earlier on. There's a Vine out there, and I retweeted it yesterday into my feed of showing him getting tackled by Houston in the preseason. And now, look, I don't want to get into an argument whether it was a foul or not. I think it would be a foul in most Latin leagues. I don't think that anyone that watches that would think – I think it is a foul, too, based on how the laws are interpreted now. However, the point is it was a very aggressive play, and he was rolled over and he just stood up. He didn't chase back. He didn't track back at all. He just sort of stood up and kind of put his hands up and said, like, that's what he's going to have to get used to, because when the season collects in, it's going to be even more intense than it's been so far. He's obviously a physical guy that can handle that to a certain extent, but he's played in leagues that don't necessarily favor that kind of play, and he's going to have to get used to it. So we'll see how he adjusts. Although we get to see him twice in 2 weeks here in Toronto in August, and I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be an interesting play. The Supporters Shield. Well, actually, let's go East and West first. Okay. So that's no, we'll go Supporters Shield because I'm going to do in regular season. Who do you think is going to win the support? Who's going to have the best record in the league at the end of the year, Kevin?
That's hard to say because the East is so much weaker, in my opinion, than the West that there's a chance that one team is going to dominate the East. That means a lot of points being racking up in the tally, which means an Eastern team has a better shot of winning the Supporters Shield. And if New England continues to play the way they did at the end of the season in the playoffs, I wouldn't put past New England to win the Supporters Shield in 2015.
Yeah, it's not a bad pick, and it's certainly one I thought of, but I ended up going really boring with this pick.
LA?
I think Galaxy are going to win the Supporters Shield.
My second choice again.
Yeah, you could say I think Seattle is going to try and adjust its schedule a little bit this year so that they're not pushing for Supporters Shield, so that they're not, they're going to make an assumption that I'm not sure is true, that the reason that they're failing in the playoffs is because they're tired or something. I think the reason Seattle has failed to win in the playoffs is as much to do with luck as anything else. However, that's a different topic altogether. I think that the Galaxy are such a team that they need to be proven. What's the Ric Flair thing? To be the man, you got to beat the man. And until someone beats the man in LA, they're the man.
True. The only reason I didn't pick the Galaxy is because of the slight risk that the East is so much weaker that there's a team that can rally more points because of that. Because the West now with Kansas City and Houston being in the West is going to be hard to rack up an 80-something point, right?
All right. Well, we'll combine our last 2 picks here into one, and then into 3. Well, it's what's the MLS Cup final going to be? This is absurd to make this prediction in March. It's March now, in March, but let's do it. What's the MLS Cup final going to be, and who's going to win that?
Bruce Arena. The LA Galaxy. Whoever Bruce Arena coaches is going to win. That's the answer because, like you just said, if you want to beat the man, you got to beat the man, and nobody's beaten the man in the playoff, at least consistently, in the last, decade almost now?
Yeah, absolutely. The Galaxy are a remarkable team in a lot of ways. They just have a lot of talent there. Look, I picked the Galaxy to win the MLS Cup too. I picked them to beat the Columbus Crew in the final. We didn't hear your New England you're picking in the final? Or?
Yeah, New England. Yeah, New England.
So a repeat of last year.
Oh, wow, we're so original.
All right, let's do a couple quick fun ones here. Who do you think? I said Altidore was going to win the overall MVP, so I guess my answer's there. But I'll give a second one. If you had to pick like the outstanding Canadian team performance, who do you think it would be? Like what player on the Canadian teams, just off the top of your head, would you pick to have a great year?
Piatti. I think Piatti's on the same level as the Javinko. I think Piatti is going to be, he's underrated for now, and it's going to be his coming out party. Wait till this summer when he's going to have 6 months consistent playing with the Montreal Impact. Barring no injuries, I think Piatti can be a surprise factor in these.
And, I guess the Laba would be my pick outside of Altidore. He's not going to get attention for awards or anything because of the type of play he plays. But, there's an argument. I think we did end up naming him our MVP last year in our awards show for the Canadian team. So definitely you got to watch him again. We'll end it with this. I want you to tell me what TFC's major crisis on August 30th is going to be this year.
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I'm not going to go with the easy route with the coaching because the Tim Bezbatchenko put his guy on the coaching spot, so there's not going to be complaining about that. I think it's going to have to do with the lack of Voyageurs Cup presence.
Okay, so you think that's going to be the major crisis there? I think
that's the only one because they're going to finish third, we're saying. So what could be a crisis if you finish third? The only thing they could miss on is the CCL and the Voyageurs Cup. So the only thing I can see is the supporters being, yeah, you're doing good in MLS, but what about outside of MLS? You suck. Yeah, that's the only controversy I can see.
What's going to break down TFC season this year is that everything's going to be going smoothly into August, and the fans are going to be happy. The place is going to be full again. It's going to seem like 2007, 2008 in the corners. People are going to be singing. It's going to be a great atmosphere. It's going to be the talk of the league. And then all of a sudden, we will go into the stadium for a game in late August, and we will notice if we look up to the very top corner of the stadium that there will be a bunch of blue seats that are being installed.
I was going to say it. You're going to see a logo with an A on it.
And as the game progresses, they will be kicking people to the stadium, put more blue seats in and more blue seats and more blue seats in. And by the end of the game, there will be riots in the stands. People will be getting stadium bans. And, the next day they're going to paint lines on the field. And the Argos will play their playoff games at BMO Field this year. I think that's going to be the prevailing crisis that derails TFC this year.
Hey, at least it has nothing to do with the actual club.
Fair enough. All right. We're going to call it a day at that point. Kevin and I will work the schedule. We're back tomorrow. We're going to interview Tim Holt tomorrow, supposedly. Hopefully
Allegedly.
that. Yeah, we'll put a show out if he does. We'll have our 5 rings as well this week. And we'll just say it right now. At some point later this week, we will touch base in some capacity to talk about the CBA, whether the season's going ahead or not. So Kevin and I will get the scheduling down for that and tweet it out. But in the meantime, until that time, Kevin.
Have a great Champions League tomorrow night, and hopefully have a great soccer.